folks who are out there leading in areas where I've been active, and where we think we can get support and highlight some of the things that I've done in my congressional career. And this area obviously is one that I think I separate myself out from the pack. Not because they don't check the box. I mean, I think they all can say that they're pro-life. That's a good thing. And I'm glad that the candidates who are out there, at least the major candidates out there, are pro-life. But none of them have really taken the role of leadership on those issues. And as I said, the Faith and Freedom, I don't know what they call it, gathering, whatever it was, conference, that a lot of them were there this year, but I was there last year, and I'm going to be there next year, and because and the same can be said with a lot of other areas. I'm active on more cultural issues. I'm active on economic issues. I'm active on national security issues. Travel around the country, lecturing on national security issues. So I always say, I'm the full spectrum. I'm someone that you can trust across the board on these issues. And I always say, if you have the courage to stand up and take principled positions on the most controversial issues of the day, then pretty good grounds to think can be trustworthy to have the courage to do so on issues that are not so controversial among Republicans, like cutting taxes or cutting spending or reforming entitlements. Those, compared to these issues, are from the standpoint of the popular culture and the media, those issues are nothing compared to standing up and fighting on these issues. So I think that this establishes my bona fides that I have been a consistent conservative over the time in Congress, and have been very clear in this campaign as someone who's willing to go out and take positions, stand by them as principled positions, because this is what our country needs. I'll give you an example: the Ryan plan. I mean, I think I'm the only one who has embraced it without qualification. In fact, said that while I admire Paul Ryan, that I think that it was a good first step, and it was a good first step. But there's more that needs to be done, and even Paul would tell you that more needs to be done. And I've actually suggested things that need to be done, as opposed to the other candidates. So I think that's it's a positive attribute that I have, that I bring to the equation of someone that you can trust, and someone that you know is going to be honest with you and confronting the issues.
What are the solutions for preventing abortions other than defunding Planned Parenthood and things like that?
Well, I mean, here's probably the best solution you have, which is, and I love the name of this place. I said this when I came in, when I heard about it: informed choices. Every other medical procedure that I'm aware of, I mean, the government bends over backwards to make sure that people, particularly young people, particularly minors, have all the information. Informed consent is the watchword for any medical procedure. I mean, schools make parents sign consent forms to give their children, Tylenol, and yet when it comes to abortion, you have a whole industry out there working to make sure that women don't get information, that they don't have informed consent. And what we find is, and I know this clinic will tell you, they can tell you themselves, but that once women are fully exposed to all of the information surrounding the choice that they have to make, that they often comes to a very different decision. And you have an industry who makes money on performing abortions, who lobbies and pushes laws to make sure that women don't get information, so that they are predisposed. If they're thinking about an abortion, they're predisposed to have that, to not get information that would convince them to do otherwise. That is a real problem that I don't know how any state legislature, and these are mostly state legislative issues, would not want every woman taking this incredibly important decision that obviously women live with the rest of their lives, without having all the information that they would want, and not have any regrets. I mean, people obviously still make their decision, but obviously the more information you have, to have. If you found out something later, you say, oh, I didn't know, that can be very devastating to me.
Senator,
State
can I ask-
legislators and a handful of states have passed laws that ban abortions after the 20th week of pregnancy. Should federal law be changed to reflect that sort of?
It's funny, when I was leading the charge on partial birth abortion, several members came forward and said, why don't we just ban all abortions? Tom Daschle was one of them, Susan Collins and others. Now, they wanted a health exception, which of course is a phony exception, which would make the ban ineffective. But I think most Americans are uncomfortable with late-term abortions. They realize that it's a situation when you find out you're pregnant and that obviously people are in crisis and they react, but it's different once to most Americans, or I shouldn't say to most, to some Americans, those who even support abortion, say, well, once the child is able to live outside the womb, it's interesting. It's sort of, where do you draw the line? And I draw the line at the moment that the child is a human being, which is the moment of conception. The child is genetically human and is alive, so it's a human being. It's a being, it's alive, and it's human. Other people draw the lines in other places. Can the child live outside the womb? That's about 22, 23 weeks. And as a result, some people draw the line there. And even those who are, like I said, who are pro-choice. So my feeling is that I believe we need to overturn Roe versus Wade. I think that it's a poorly and horribly decided decision, consistent with a lot of bad decisions the courts have made, where they believe they can create rights that don't exist in the Constitution. And I think Congress and legislature should be able to legislate beyond even this 22 weeks. But to me, it's a good place to test the court and have the court rule on this constitutionality. I think that anytime that we can bring a decision to the court and give them an opportunity to relook at abortion cases is a good thing. And if the federal government wanted to do that, I certainly wouldn't oppose it by any stretch of the imagination. But it's I think the states can probably take care of this and have. I would support it if the Congress would pass that.
Medicaid Administrator Don Berwick just said that Indiana is at risk of losing all of their Medicaid funding over this new law Mitch Daniels just signed that would cut funding for Planned Parenthood. Do you think Daniels should risk losing Medicaid for all Indiana residents to take a stand on abortion?
No, I think that Mr. Berwick or Dr. Berwick, whatever he is, should not impose arbitrary sanctions on Indiana because the people of Indiana. This is the top-down government, Washington knows best mentality that we're going to tell you how to run your Medicaid's a shared program. It's a state-federal program. States have waivers. Obama's has given many waivers already on the Medicaid program, but he's chosen not to give a waiver on this, which tells you that this is not an issue of health care. This is an ideological issue for the president. This is a political issue for the president. And if he's willing, if the president of the United States is willing to sacrifice the health care of Indiana residents because of the politics around abortion, I think that tells you a lot about the president's real care and concern for those who are in need in our society and of health care under Medicaid, and what his concern for them versus his own concern for scoring political points.
Took Plenty just backtrack out of answer about criminal penalties for abortion and said he favors criminal penalties for doctors who perform them, but not women who receive them.
I've never supported criminal penalties for women who receive abortions.
What about for doctors who perform them?
I have supported criminal penalties and licensure penalties for doctors. If abortion is outlawed, obviously that would be part of that process.
You said that none of your competitors have taken a leadership role on this issue. How so?
Well, I mean, I was the author of the partial birth abortion statute. I was the author of the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. I was, a leader on the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. I was, a leader on embryonic stem cells. I mean, these were initiatives that I I took the lead on a national scale and took to the floor of the United States Senate and argued those things. And you know, I haven't seen that type of activity, nor do I see that kind of the rhetoric in talking about these issues during the course of their public life. And it's one thing to go in front of a pro-life group and say you're pro-life. It's another thing to go out and actively work as an elected official to make real changes in the culture when it comes to this issue.
You mentioned earlier about that you can talk about the economy. Are you familiar with what Governor Pawlenty released today, his economic plan? One of the things he talked about was he thinks with a combination of tax cuts, specifically corporate, getting rid of capital gains, getting rid of interest that you make, that he can see us doing
Taxes on interest, he wants to give taxes on interest.
you know, like bank accounts.
Right.
CDs. He's thinking that overall, with all of his plans, he can do 5% growth over a decade, which would be, as you know, historically pretty unprecedented in recent times. Is that an attainable goal?
Look, I support a pro-growth agenda. I think I'm not going to sit here. I'm not an economist, and so I can't say whether 5% growth or 4% growth or 3.5% growth is sustainable or not. I think what you do is you create the atmosphere from the standpoint of government, from the tax situation, regulatory situation, litigation. All of those things are important. And so it's not just about taxes. It's about the regulatory environment. It's about the what we can do to push through reforms of our litigation system. It's about the implementation of legislation through how we enforce a lot of these regulations. And it's also the attitude of the president. And I think the president has been as hostile to the business community and to business in general. And to me, we've got to focus. We're going to really transform America and create the opportunity for all Americans to participate in the recovery. We need to focus on how we make more things in America. I've come from Pennsylvania. I always say I'm from Pennsylvania. We still make things, and I really believe that one of the great keys to having a strong group of people in the middle-income area of America was that we made a lot of things here. We had a lot of people working in manufacturing, which has that multiplier effect. And so we need to have a policy, and I'm working on that right now, as to how we can create more of those types of jobs here, bring those jobs back. The president's been very antagonistic toward those because of his environmental policy. He doesn't like things made here because when you make things, sometimes it's dirty. When you mine, it can be dirty. When you drill, it can be dirty. Well, yeah, it can be, but it can be done well, and it can be done environmentally well if you have folks who are willing to work with the business community to make sure that we can comply instead of going out and trying to make it impossible for them to start in the first place. And so that to me is the kind of change in attitude that's necessary. And I think, again, if the big concern, it's a great concern about the concentration of wealth. If you want that concentration of wealth to flow down, then you've got to make things here. And that is going to be one of the central tenets of the policy that I put together.
I think it's fair to say you're behind the pack in terms of name recognition amongst Iowa voters. How big of a liability do you see that as at this point in the game?
Well, if it was January, I'd say it's a big liability, but it's not January, and we've got a lot of work to do. And as you know, it's nice that everybody's here, and there are a lot of Iowans who are paying attention. A lot aren't at this point, and so it's going to take some time. And we have the time. We have the summer and the fall, and we're going to spend a lot of time here. We're going to get a chance to meet and talk to folks. And one of the things that I've been very gratified is that when there is an opportunity for people to see all the candidates together, to get a chance to size them up, we do very well after people are asked in straw polls and other forums, what they think about the candidates. We've done very, very well. And so I just continue to go out and deliver a very clear message and talk about how critical this election is, talk about my preparation, my record, and the veracity I have with even those who oppose me. They know you can trust me. They don't like the fact that you can trust me, but you can trust me that when I say I'm going to do something, we're going to stick by our guns. And a lot of folks in the Republican Party are looking for someone that fits that description.
And could you briefly summarize your Iowa strategy and how large of a role will social issues play in that?
As you know, I talk about myself as someone who is active across the board on conservative issues. The fact that I'm active on social issues makes me different than a lot of people, but it's part of a comprehensive approach that I took when I was in office. Remember, I represented the state of Pennsylvania. It's a pretty diverse state, and I got involved in a lot of issues, and everything from agriculture policy to labor policy to foreign policy to entitlements and Social Security. I was active and leading on a lot of these areas, and one of them happened to also be moral cultural issues. And we're gonna go out and talk about them all. And obviously in Iowa, we're gonna run into people who have different interests, and we'll talk about them as the interests come up. So,
is it your goal to be known as the social issues candidate?
It's my goal to be known as the strongest, most principled, authentic conservative in the race, who can be trusted to be that, not just when he's campaigning, but after he's elected. And I represented Pennsylvania. I got elected twice in that state, statewide. And I got elected twice in heavily Democratic districts when I ran for the Congress. And I was a principled conservative throughout. And so you can look at someone who knew that it would be a challenge every time I ran to reflect the values that I believed in my voting record and my public life, which I did. And I realized that there might be an election year where Republicans and conservatives are not going to do well, and if I happen to be running an election year, then probably I'm not going to win that election. But that was okay, because my feeling was you go out there and you owe the people of your state, you owe the people of your country, your industry to do your best to discern all the information you can to make a decision, and then to do what you think is in the best interest of the country. That's how a republic works. That's how representative democracy works, and that's what I did. And I think people can look at that record and take some comfort that what I say on the campaign trail is not something different than what I do when I'm elected.
So
As
should we
governor,
assume next year will be a better year than 2006 was for you?
I would be shocked if it's not a better year than 2006. I remind everybody that our gubernatorial candidate last year won the election by 10 points. The year I ran, the gubernatorial candidate lost by 21 points. So, we picked up 5 congressional seats, 4 or 5, I can't remember now, 4 or 5. We lost a similar number in 2006. We picked up our biggest majority in the House in Pennsylvania. We lost the biggest majority that we had on it. So it was just a completely flip election. It was the worst in 2006. Turned out to be the best in 2010. Now, obviously, I would like it if 2012 was more like 2010, but certainly it'll be some ways in between.
We have
John
2 or 3 quick questions.
John McCain recently said you made a mistake when you said you didn't understand how torture works. Do you now regret making those statements?
With all due respect, if you're going to quote me, please quote me. Don't paraphrase and then put some sort of twist on what I said. I didn't say that. And I think you should go back and you should read what I said, and you should read the article and how I said it. What I said was that we have a very different opinion on how the enhanced interrogation program works. And I've been very clear about that. We still have that disagreement.
you talked about being authentic. Do you think on social issues, has Governor Romney been authentic?
I'm not going to characterize, someone else's authenticity. I'll just comment on my own. I think I have a very consistent track record on that people can look at and trust that they know where I've been and they know where I'll be.
Have you given a stance on ethanol subsidies, different
Yeah,
candidates
I've
have come
issued
from?
statements repeatedly on this issue and said that, it's been an interesting time, coming here for the last year plus to Iowa. I've learned a lot about the ethanol industry, talked to a lot of people in the industry about ethanol, and have been very impressed by the tremendous progress that has been made in that industry. Because, when you travel around the country, ethanol has, pretty bad name in a lot of areas that, this is a big boondoggle, it doesn't work, it uses more energy than it consumes, and then it consumes more energy than it produces. And so I thought, well, I've got to find out what the truth is. And so I've done that. And I've been very impressed that a lot of progress has been made and in the efficiency of the production process, and in just that, the amount of energy that goes into as opposed to what comes out. The numbers that are thrown around by a lot of candidates and a lot of people around the country, including some potential candidates for president, are not current technologies. And the current technology is actually very efficient, and it's so efficient that I believe that they can be weaned off the subsidy. And when I was in the Congress, I didn't vote for those subsidies. Now I believe that we should, the policy that I've announced is that we should phase out those subsidies over a 5-year period of time. And each of those years, half of that phase out, so half of the subsidy phase out, so it's, what is it, 45 cents of 100, so 9 cents would be phased out every year. Half of that, 4.5 cents, would be used to help build, to provide tax incentives to build infrastructure for ethanol distribution, for E85. So it would be an opportunity to phase out the subsidy, and the problem, at least I hear from the industry, is distribution of the broader ethanol product, not just the blend, the 10% blend that's used in most of the country, but the broader, E85 product. And so I put forward something that provides some help for the industry to expand its footprint from a distribution point of view, and after 5 years they would be on their own. And I would suggest that that should be the policy with respect to energy. That we should be out of the business of supporting one industry or another industry. That all of the industry, from the standpoint of taxation, should be treated the same. Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.